Hello, everybody. It's the Meista from Brews and Tunes. Cheers. I am very, very excited today. I am chatting with the one and only Vic Stown of Vindicator. Thank you so much, Vic, for joining me today.
Absolutely.
How you doing?
Well, I'm all right. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm getting over a sinus infection, so forgive me if I sniff or snuff, or I'll try not to like hock a lug like I've been doing for the past several days. But I'm doing, all things considered, I'm all right. So I'm on the mend, so that's good.
Good. Yeah, I'm right, and I'm in the same boat with you. I've been fighting a nasty cold for the last 2 weeks, so hopefully I'm on the mend. But yeah, I'm a little stuffed up as well. I kind of sound
the
like
stuff episode.
Yeah, the stuffed episode. Yeah, we both sound like Elmer Fudd and Snuffleupagus.
Yeah.
So that's all right. So what have you been up to lately? What's going on, especially musically? Like, what are you doing right now?
I've got, and I hate when people do this, and so forgive me for doing the exact same thing. I am being a hypocrite here, but there's a lot of stuff in the pipes right now, and which I'm being genuine. Like, the gears are actually moving, so I feel more confident in alluding to things when they're actually in play, as opposed to being like big things coming next year and then just not doing anything.
Right.
But the next probably couple of years for Vindicator and Volcana are going to be pretty exciting. But that's as far as I can go because I've not been given clearance to share information. I mean, I probably could, but I don't know for sure. So, anyone that's watching that is a fan of either project, there's some cool stuff in the pipes, certainly. And one thing I can share is that we're Vindicator's going to be putting out a new demo this year.
Oh, nice.
And I don't know why I went with demo, but I felt compelled to kind of just get some tracks out. I didn't want to do an EP. I don't know, man. I'm not a massive fan of EPs myself. So why not make an EP of music that will probably get retracked and kind of touched up and, kind of strip it down and leave it a little more on the raw side and kind of give people a heads up as to what's coming next in terms of sound for the band. So we'll be putting that out hopefully by June.
Cool.
That's the goal, is to have it out by June. We'll see, how that, the things like that, that might be wrong, but there will be some new music this year from that particular project. So that's exciting for me. Anything else though, I don't know. Nothing real exciting. I do the heavy metal horror podcast with some buddies. We've had some pretty great guests. That's been fun. But aside from that, I've just been trying to stay on top of, creating new music. I feel like if you don't stay on it, like, I feel like your creativity muscle will atrophy,
Right. Right.
And like, I don't know, like maybe that's not real. I always want to take like a year off, and I always say this year I'm taking a year off, and I wind up doing something and I'm like, man, I didn't anticipate that. But I mean, that's okay by me.
Yeah.
So that's about it. Yeah, nothing real exciting. No world tours, no music videos, nothing like that. But I try to stay as active as I can with what I have.
Nice. Are you guys in either project? Do you have any live anything live happening right now? Any shows coming up?
Unfortunately, no. We were trying to do some stuff this year with Vindicator, and we weren't able to pull it off. It's a little trickier for us these days. Our new lead player lives in Billings, Montana, so we can't just like plan like a normal band does. I don't want him going in debt coming out to play a show. I'll shell out $300 to play one local show, or a weekend, like 3 shows or something. So planning has to be very, very thorough with the current lineup. And not only that, I mean, everybody's got jobs and whatnot. So we typically have to plan almost a year out if we want to accomplish anything. And I try to make the most, I want to make the most of, everyone's time. So we were close to doing something this year, and everything fell through, and it is what it is. You just pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and start making the next plans to see if they can come to fruition again. Hopefully next year. I kind of can tie that into the weird, like me alluding to things like next year's a big year. And we've got some big plans, and I can at least say hopefully those include live performances.
Cool.
But Volcana, I don't know that we'll ever play live. That's a project where, Jeff's in Washington and Glenn's in New Jersey, and that's a really hard one to rope together, just because of how spread out we are.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly wouldn't turn down, like, if some awesome festival got a hold of us, but I don't know how it would work either, because I don't write that music to play and sing, at all. And that's kind of it. That's what's fun about that project, is that there's really no box, and I just kind of do what I want to do. And it makes a big difference when you're writing music, if you kind of don't hinder yourself with, well, I got to play this part too. So, doing vocal melodies and trying to do this riff might be rather difficult. But I don't know. I mean, I never say never, maybe someday, but as for right now, we're just staying a studio project.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's interesting that you point out. And that's one thing I've always been curious about with certain bands, and especially a project like that, where, in terms of the writing and having to, really take, a conscious effort of saying, okay, well, I can't play this on stage. And as you said, playing some crazy riff and then trying to do vocal harmonies at the same time. And I think sometimes we as fans don't take that into account. Like, especially when like, oh, they never play, this particular song live. I wish they would play that song live. I'm like, well, it's because it's insanely hard to play live.
Right.
So.
We do our best. We do our best. And I don't certainly ever tell people I'm a virtuoso. So it's like, even with Vindicator, I've written some tracks that I desperately wanted to play live, and just found out that, like, maybe the picking pattern is in direct conflict with the way that the lyrics are delivered. And it's incredibly difficult to get your brain to separate those two things.
Right.
And I know there's tricks and ways around it. You can, I've heard songs live that it's like, they're not playing that exactly the same. And that's more than likely why, they've simplified it so that they could play it live. I guess I've never entertained that in terms of, songs for Vindicator, but, I don't know. I just, with that project in particular, excuse me, it's a little more, again, I'm not the best vocalist, but it's a little more vocal oriented than Vindicator. It's not just shouting angry words.
Mm-hmm.
And, even the simplistic vocal melodies that are in Volcana can be difficult with some of the riff work that has been laid. So, I mean, I don't know. I guess I never practiced it either. So hard to say. That one, I know, like I said, I never really had the intention of playing live with it, but I never, would turn that opportunity down, because those guys are great. Jeff is one of my favorite people, and Glenn is as well. That's why, I wanted to work with those two individuals. So I think touring, playing several shows with those guys would be nothing short of a blast and incredibly pleasant. They're both very talented people. But yeah, as for right now, there's no plans for that particular project to play live.
Gotcha. That makes sense. What about 6 months ago, Vindicator released Communal Decay, which was the first studio album in several years, I think close to 5 years, that you guys had put out. And it's and definitely worth the wait, in my opinion. Great album.
Thank you.
Very cool stuff. And for those that don't know, very much steeped in, kind of that 80s California thrash sound. Very cool stuff. I really like Vindicator a lot. Really fun band. Kind of how did the, I know Vindicator's been around for quite a long time, early 2000s. How did the band come together? How did you guys start? I know it's with your brother, of course, Jesse. So how did it all come together? When did you start kind of formulating the band?
Yeah. So Vindicator came from the ruins of Violent Night, which was our project that Jesse and I was in prior to Vindicator. The band kind of fell apart unceremoniously and left us wanting more. And we found a lot of resistance in our lead player at the time, Mikey Belisle, who wanted to go more of a progressive kind of Gothenburg route. And we wanted to go more straightforward thrash. So given the opportunity to start a new band, that was the direction we wanted to go. And of course, you know, Wayne Holocaust was also in Violent Night, so he was an obvious choice. And we didn't care about talent. You know, when we started that band, we just wanted to be kind of a punk driven new wave of British heavy metal, Bay Area with some splash of Teutonic stuff band. We just wanted to be a gross blackened thrash band. And, you know, so Marshall, who's also from the same town as all of us, he was in a band in Cleveland called Black Trinity. It was a black metal band. Great. He was a great front man for that band. We would have never expected him to be able to pull off that character that he pulled off in that band. And he had recently left the band. And so we were like, well, Marshall plays bass and he's got that crazy voice. Let's do this. And that's kind of how that launched. You know, it just started with us being pissed off that Mike broke the band up. And that's, you know, it wasn't a feud. We were just mad about it because we had more stuff we wanted to do. And we spent a long time with Violent Night. It was like a 3-year project where we played out like once a year. It was stupid, but we would practice like 3 times a week. We did a lot of things wrong with that band and we learned a lot. And so we started this band, wrote like 10 songs and immediately started booking shows. And it was absolutely all the right things. We made all the right moves in that sense. So it came together pretty quick after Violent Night split up. It was October of 2005, I think, is when Vindicator formed. And it took us a couple of months to kind of figure out what we wanted to do and all that stuff. But yeah, we threw it together pretty quick, got the MySpace page up and running, and we're part of the forefront of the new wave of thrash movement.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, once formed and you guys started playing and, really building a name for yourself and a strong reputation and, audience, There Will Be Blood was the first full length album that came out from the band. Another, fantastic, debut album. And yeah, I think really kind of opened the floodgates in a lot of ways for, as you mentioned, kind of this new wave of thrash metal at that time in America, where it was really exciting and still is, I think, with bands like Vindicator and there's a lot of great thrash metal bands that came out of that time period.
Right.
I think that really kind of harkened back without making it too nostalgic. Harken back to the that Bay Area and the Teutonic bands as you mentioned. And yeah, just for me it was great because I felt like there was this missing piece, as far as kind of it seemed like thrash had, I won't say died, but it felt like that in a lot of ways, as an old thrasher.
Right. I was thinking about this the other day, and it was, because we got treated pretty poorly when we came out. We were posers, because we walked the walk and talked the talk. I mean, we could hold our own if some elitist walked up to us and tried to quiz us on old thrash stuff. We knew all that stuff. We spent hours on the Metal Archives learning about our favorite bands. Right. We were always down some rabbit hole checking out some obscure release that one guy from Violence was on or something like that. So we had the patch vests and we had the high tops and the tight pants, and people were like turning their noses up. But it was like it took quite a time to kind of prove ourselves. I got derailed there for a minute because there was something I wanted to say too coming down this, and I got derailed. What were you coming out of? I wanted to address that. That was really good. What did you say prior to my mouth opening?
I guess it was just kind of what did I say?
No worries if you can't remember. It's my bad. No. But I wanted to touch on start. Oh yeah, the thrash thing, because here's the thing. Here it is. I picked it back up. In the late 90s and early 2000s, the Big Four, for example, didn't sound like the Big Four. They were writing different kind of music, and it wasn't until around the time that these kids started playing thrash metal again that all those bands said, we need to get back to our roots. We need more of that sound, like our old albums. We saved careers and got zero thanks for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the shittiest thing about the whole thing, is that we revitalized old thrash by being, and we were playing that shit because we loved it.
Yeah.
That was what we wanted to do. We wanted to look like those guys, and we wanted to sound like those guys, and we got ridiculed for it, but we saved those guys.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it. Maybe it's a little lofty of me to say so, but you know, man, you get treated like garbage because you're playing something that you love. And I mean, not ignorantly so either, you know, but I mean, it took us a decade to get respect in our hometown. And I'm respected by some of my favorite local musicians now. So, I mean, I guess I accomplished that, but it took us a long time to people just thought we were a fad band. I get it. A lot of those bands came out around the time.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of, 2008 to like 2010, everybody had a thrash band. And labels were this is my favorite thing. The big labels were slapping thrash on their hype stickers on every release.
Yeah.
I have this, like, I don't know what I would call it. It's not thrash at all. But the hype sticker says like something thrash metal. So when you put it on, you're expecting thrash, and it's like, this isn't thrash at all.
Yeah.
Like, not even close. And it became a bad word.
Yeah. And
you can tell it became a bad word because like Toxic Holocaust stopped putting toxic thrash metal on stuff and started putting toxic heavy metal on stuff. I mean, that's no joke. There is a significant shift where people started being like, just another garbage thrash band. They wouldn't even listen to the band. And if you called yourself a thrash band, it was a bad word. It was a bad thing to call yourself. I mean, I know the scene got oversaturated and very quickly, but man, it was wild that so many people shit on it.
Yeah.
But it's sad because, I mean, it burned out fast too. You know, you've only got Havoc and Warbringer really still hanging in there in terms of the old bands that came around with the first movement, you know. I mean, we never went anywhere, but we certainly scaled back our, activity, I suppose.
Well, but I think you guys really made a name for yourself, though, especially in the underground metal world. I mean, Vindicator comes up all the time in conversations, at least in my circle. But I totally agree with you. I think, and it's funny because it's almost like it's full circle. It's
right,
kind of what happened in the 80s,
right,
thrash metal as well, where it also became a bad word, and around 87,
right,
and yeah, the whole movement kind of started to crumble at that time. And especially when you got into the early 90s and Metallica's just putting out rock and roll albums, and
right,
but yeah, I totally agree with you. I think your band Warbringer, Havoc, some of those other bands at that time really in a lot of ways did kind of save the ass of the big names,
right? Yeah, I mean, it totally revitalized careers, man.
Yeah.
I mean, because all those bands started like being like, man, we need to sound like that again. I mean, we lit the fire because, I mean, you don't want no young kids showing you up. Right. That's just kind of a standard of the whole thing. And it's like, I mean, I remember reading interviews. Man, I think I've got a Decibel or a Metal Hammer or a Revolver where they interviewed Dave Mustaine, and he was just shitting on, kids wearing tight pants and high tops. And I was like, fuck, dude, you wore that same shit in the early 80s. And this is like this is what do they say about mimicry or something is the highest form of respect, that's, dude, we respected the hell out of these guys, and they weren't really doing much to return that. And it's funny because some of them will bitch about that same thing about the early 90s when like grunge and that whole movement took over, and we let these guys open up for us, and then they didn't even bother to return the favor. And it was like, and here they are now complaining about kids playing the same. It's like those guys have like they're so guarded about that the 80s, like you can't make music from the 80s. That's our music.
Yeah.
Like music fans and artists alike, they're like, oh, you can't do that because you weren't writing in the 80s. And it's like, what the hell's that?
Yeah.
No, sorry, you don't have exclusivity to an era of music. If we want to make music like that, we will.
Right.
And so I don't know. We're still doing it though. And I think that's the thing. I guess you prove yourself and you prove your worth by just continuing to piss people off, I suppose. Just keeping at it, decades after decades, you're still doing it. Even if nobody's liking it, it's like, yeah, well, that just proves to you that I wasn't a poser now, was I? Because I'm still doing it and I'm still making no money off of it. And, so it's, I don't know. It's weird. It's weird. I don't like I got into this music because I didn't like clicks and that kind of stuff. And then you just find out that it's just music's just like high school anyways. Right. So, just do what you do and enjoy it, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what you have to do. And like I said, I mean, the good thing is, you've made a name for yourself. You're well known and well respected in the music community, and especially in the metal music community. So, and I guess when you get down to it, that's the important thing, right? I mean, that you're making the music that you want.
Right. Yeah, you're doing it the way that you want to do it, and you're kind of making it. Like for me, Vindicator was a tough thing for me. I recently had talked about this. When I came into Vindicator, I really had, high hopes and expectations and these huge dreams and goals. And each year getting slapped in the face, numerous times, I had to adjust all of that. And I had to change dreams and goals so that I didn't just get burnt out and completely stop, because it's easy to get sucked in to things. One moment you're on cloud nine and the next you are in hell. Yeah. Day to day, those kind of changes, and that takes its toll on your well-being, your soul and your mental well-being, and it can drain you. And at some point you could be a phenomenal musician and end your career prematurely because you just are so tired of the nonsense. You kind of got to adjust what you want, and I'm not saying, being a realist or be negative about stuff, but I mean, you got to like readjust and reassess decisions that you've made. And I feel like that helps save your certain dreams and goals. So just like for me, the fact that I can still write music now, after I've been writing music for like 20 years at this point, and I can still do it. Yeah. And I think the reason that I can still do it is because I'm not looking to be a rich and famous rock star. Now these days, I'm not even looking to make a living wage off of my music. I've stepped back and said, I just want to make this at this point, and hopefully it pays for itself. That's my new goal. That's my current goal with music. I don't like going in the hole for stuff. I've lost my ass in a lot of investments in terms of band stuff. And these days, if I make something, I want to get back out of it what I put into it. Yeah. And outside of that, I'm fine, So I would say that, like, for me, that's been my saving grace. And I think that, I think a lot of people should, I don't know, just kind of adhere to that in terms of, like, if you've got expectations, just adjust them as you travel through whatever it is you're going through. Just adjust them. You don't have to get rid of them, but you're going to have to, at some point in time, you might, if your expectations aren't met, that's an easy way to just become bitter about the whole thing that you're taking on. You become bitter, and it's just going to seize you up. I honestly don't know how I got there. See, I told you that I would do this. I would get just go down crazy rabbit holes and shit.
Oh, but this is great. I love it. And I totally agree with you. And I mean, that's the sad thing is, I'm a music junkie, as you can see behind me, and off to the side, there's, stacks of records and right on tapes over there. And, I'm a music junkie, but I also recognize the fact that the music industry is mean and nasty and chews people up and spits them out. And it's sad to see, especially young musicians, young artists that are trying to make it right now, and trying to make a name for themselves, and just getting crushed by, I won't name any names, but I'm friends with some people on Facebook that a young band, and they're really good, really great band, and they just get destroyed by these terrible people out there. There's just shitty people in the industry, which in any industry you're going to have that, but it just seems like in the music industry there's just this nastiness sometimes, especially with companies. And especially like when we were starting out, like I said, like it was immediately
you can't play thrash because you're not from the 80s. And I mean, like, a lot of reviews were like that. A lot of reviews. Now, don't get me wrong. There were a lot of bands that deserved to be shredded. There were, you know, and again, I don't want to sound like the people who were reviewing us and lumping us into wrong categories, but like, as soon as the term pizza thrash happened, that was bad.
Yeah.
You know, like, I didn't know what the hell that was.
Yeah.
And people were lumping us into that category. And I was like, the fuck is pizza thrash? When did a food genre happen?
Right.
And I mean, these kids that were singing, it was just beer and pizza songs. And it was like, okay, I get why you're not taking them seriously, but you can't blanket the entire genre because a couple bands are writing dumb lyrics, you know, like, you just can't do that. And I mean, maybe that's what they're into, and maybe they're a joke band. I mean, are you going to throw MOD and SOD under the bus too because they weren't super serious? Or,
yeah,
you know, so I don't know. It's easy. It's real easy to find people who hate things, especially today, and people in the industry. And when I say industry, I'm including like reviewers and such. Reviewers can be rough, man. Where they have no clue what point you were trying to make or what you were trying to convey in your writing, and they just, well, this is what this song's about, and this is stupid because, and it's like, man, you are so off base.
Yep.
You have no idea what you're talking about. So I hope people don't read this and instantaneously be like, well, I'm not listening to that because this is what he, you know, I mean, I encourage people to you know, check things out for themselves. I never, you know, reviews annoy me, but I don't ever, like, for me, the only time I'm reading reviews is like if I'm making a massive investment, like I'm going to buy a new bed. I want the best bed I can get. I'm going to read reviews on that bed. But if it's something that like I like if it's a beer or if it's a you know, album or something, I'm just going to go ahead and check it out. There's no excuse not to these days.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it was different before the internet, you know, where you had to buy something to check it out. But these days, you can check it out on 50 different platforms, so there's no excuse not to give it a listen and see what you think.
I agree.
But yeah, it's easy to get sucked under, and probably more so now than it ever has been.
Yeah, and that would be my advice, I think, to young bands as well. Is don't read the reviews, don't read the comments. It's
right. Yeah, I never read YouTube comments.
And I mean, you mentioned, you know, the encyclopedia, the metal encyclopedia, Metalum. You know, I go on there all the time to check out stuff, and, you know, especially researching old bands and like trying to find people, you know, things, you know, I'll hear about a band and I'm like, oh, I've never heard them, I'll go check it out. But I learned to stop reading the reviews in there.
Oh, absolutely.
Awful. There's just
we got a review on the Violent Night record. This got me good. The guy gave it a good review, but one of the songs, he literally says, Vindicator wishes they could have written this song. And I thought, that's the stupidest thing you could have put in a review, because I write all of this material. I wrote this whole album and I write all the Vindicator, you know. No, Vindicator doesn't wish they could have written this song because I wrote it. I could have just as easily made it a Vindicator song. It's like one of the dumbest things I've ever. And then he shredded, that same guy shredded the new Vindicator record. He hated it.
Wow.
But so it's it was well, at least one of them got a solid review. So that's fair. But yeah, I mean, and that stuff does. It used to really, really upset me, you know, when I was younger. And it took me a long time to kind of, I don't know, mature, I guess, and kind of get past that. It still sometimes bugs me, you know, because you're pouring your whole being into something, and you want, you know, look, man, it's not going to make me rich. I just want people to be like, good job, you know? So it's, but at the end of the day, still though, like, it's like, well, I didn't have to do this either, you know? Right. So it's a struggle of self, and you kind of gotta figure it out on your own terms at your own speed, you know, because again, you can't let those things drag you down.
Yeah,
definitely. You absolutely can't, because you just won't, that's going to stop you from doing anything else that you want to do.
Yeah.
You know, and it can damage a lot, you know? So yeah, best to take things with a grain of salt, or do what like Viking did when they got their review of that first record. And what's that one called?
I can't remember.
I can see the cover. Hey, I'm drawing a blank here and I feel stupid. Something, Do or Die. There we go. Okay. there's a review of Do or Die, and I think it was in Kerrang or something. And I love when Ron tells this story. It's something about like sounds like a band trying to be the fastest band in the world, and all they did was pull in quotations the fastest band in the world, Kerrang. I think it was Kerrang. They used that as like hype. Kerrang says fastest band in the world, and
Nice.
they cherry picked out of the terrible shit review and they pulled something positive out of it. So
That's
just
good.
try to do that. And if you can't do that, just walk away from it and don't worry about it. Take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's, constructive criticism. There's a difference between somebody just being ignorant and just trying to sound awesome and not doing I had a guy review a live show we did one time, and he gave us like a good rating. It was like 8 out of 10, but he shits on us the entire review. And he thought he was real clever by trying to utilize our song titles in his description of us. And it just came off really tacky and stupid. And I mean, I was mad, but I was also dying from laughter because I was like, this is the dumbest thing I have ever read in my life. Like the guy didn't sound clever at all. Yeah. And certainly not by trying to use our song titles as like, metaphors for how we were playing and stuff. It was dumb. And I'm being genuine there. Like if it was good, I would have been like, this is clever. It was a guy trying to be clever and just came off as dumb. But yeah, you gotta just be able to take that stuff with a grain of salt. But if there's something positive there, maybe they say, I wish this song had been this, or this song had been that, or maybe they like to track somewhere else. All criticism isn't bad. You can't come in guarded and act like, everything you do is perfect. If you can pull something away from a negative review or maybe a positive review with a few negative things, pull it away and utilize that knowledge the next time you go to do what you do. One of the a fan on Bandcamp had mentioned, how they wished that Hymns of Oblivion on Communal Decay had been the last track as opposed to the opening track. I had never considered that, and I thought, okay, I get it. That it does make sense. I understand what that individual's getting at, and my bad. The next time I won't start a song with start an album with a mid-pace song. I get it. I understand. For me, I wanted an epic beginning, but the fans wanted the kick in the face first, and kind of maybe the slower at the end. I understand that. I know you got to come in strong, and I know you got to exit strong with an album, but I'll utilize that information. I didn't get all pissed off that he didn't like the way that I had selected the songs should be on my release, because overall the guy still loved it, but he also just wasn't like, you guys are dumb because I don't like your art, or so, something like that.
Some childish little quip. Yeah. That I agree. I think one thing I think is frustrating, and I'm actually maybe part of the problem, is that anybody can review anything now and post anything online at any time, and you don't have
that's not necessarily a problem, but I've been told that, like a lot of people have said that, whereas in the past you were a writer, you reviewed things, and now the average citizen has a platform to voice their opinions, and everyone voices their opinions, as we've learned from the past couple of years of existence. You get more opinion than you do anything else. But no, I don't think that's wrong though either. As a fan, you should be able to say, this is why I like this and this is why I didn't like this,
True.
But I don't know, as an artist, you just have to, like I said, you kind of just gotta pick through and take what knowledge you can and take what praise you can. Both will help you.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. Let's change the subject a little bit and talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm really curious about, and obviously, I know you came from, you and your brother, of course, are both musicians, and I know your father was in a band way back in the day. Stutz, I think, was the name of the band back in Ohio. So I was curious about kind of your upbringing in terms of music. And, kind of when you started playing, kind of what inspired you to play. Did you initially start as a guitar player, and kind of that whole process? Did you come, obviously your father was musical, but did you come from a musical family? I guess is kind of what I'm getting.
Right. Yeah, even my grandpa was musical. He was in a rockabilly band called the Jet Tones.
Oh, cool.
they did a split with Roy something or other, where they wrote the song that the guy performed, and they were able to be on the side B because the label needed a backing band. So they were the backing band for the label Star. They wrote the song for him to perform. He sings on it. It's them as the backing band. Then on the side B is them.
That's really cool.
And they were pretty big locally, and maybe further out. He used to talk about touring, but I don't know much about, his history as a musician. Just that he was in the Jetones, and they were something, and they just didn't quite break big. And of course my dad then became a musician because his dad was a musician, and it seems to have passed off on Jesse and myself as well. It was always my dad. I used to watch my dad practice in the numerous bands he was in, and usually rehearsals were in the basement of my house. So, I'd go down there, and these guys got full Marshall stacks, and I wasn't real interested in the gear back then, like I would have been, now, but there was something larger than life about it that drew me in, and I want to do that too. So I started playing around 12. I think is when I got my first guitar. I used to mess with my dad's stuff. He didn't really like me touching his gear. I mean, I get it. Kids are kind of knuckleheads. I got kids of my own, and it's like I got stuff they can play with, so they don't have to touch my stuff. But he didn't have no stuff I could play with. So, then when I was 12, I think they bought me my first guitar and first amp, something is probably both of them cost maybe $150 or something together. And, terrible action. It was an Epiphone Strata copy, so it looked like Stratocaster. And I don't know, I just started playing and messing with that. I learned, my dad showed me a total of like 3 chords, and 2 of them were power chords. And he told me that if you learn, these chords, you can play any rock song. So naturally I was able to play Smoke on the Water, Cat Scratch Fever. And I just sort of went from there. And I think when I learned how to play Seek and Destroy, that was the pinnacle moment for me, that I reached a new plateau because it's such a riff oriented song. And I think I had $500 saved up for college. And I told my parents, like, I'm not going to college. I'm going to use that money and go buy myself a proper guitar. And I bought a Jackson Randy Rhoads V, like the American made one was like $500 because like good gear in the early 2000s was real cheap. That same guitar would be worth so much more money today because vintage people and their vintage prices. But
yeah,
I bought that and started playing like rock. I started a high school band, and it was just a crappy like rock band and chord oriented. The songs were real dumb. Everybody's got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And when high school was over, I talked to the 2 other members about kind of continuing on, and they were into the idea, just playing local shows and stuff. But then as soon as we graduated, the drummer was like, I'm not doing that. And that was it. So a few years later, I mean, I tried to start bands in between 2001 and 2003. Well, a few years later, Wayne Holocaust showed up at my house, which I was still living with my parents, and delivering pizzas. And I knew him. His mom was my 4th grade teacher. I borrowed gear from him a couple times. I knew he played guitar, and I knew he was the only other guy that I knew that could palm mute. Like no one could palm mute. No one knew what that was. Everybody's all, hitting their strings open, and you gotta leave your hand on the strings, and it makes a cool sound. Palm muting. It's like one of the foundational pieces of heavy metal, and he knew how to do it. And I knew he wasn't doing anything, so I asked him. He hands me the pizza. I'm like, hey man, we should jam. So we start trying to make a band, and we're going through people left and right. And finally, we start what is called Snow White, and it was spelled SNOWYT. Snowy T. That's what a lot of people called it. We thought we were being clever. Just another dumb kid thing. And we go through a couple guys that are playing lead, and they're all like, one of the guys that played lead for us was, oh man, we were all like in our early 20s, and the dude was like in his 40s. So, I mean, nothing wrong with that, but it was weird. Yeah. Like he was like a classic rock, like kind of guy. He was always wearing ball caps and stuff. And he would stand on his tippy toes when he played solos. It was weird. He didn't really know how to play metal either, which didn't help, but he could play lead. And but finally we found Mikey. We were in a neighboring town, and in that mall's Hot Topic, and there was a guy in there, long hair, and he looked the part. And we had been there a few times and seen him, and we're all wearing our denims with our patches and stuff. And the second time we saw that guy, I told my brother, I said, "Hey, go ask him if he's in a band." Jesse's like, "All right." So we go back in, and he's like, and we start talking to the guy, and he's like, I was going to ask you guys the same thing. We're like, "What do you do?" He's like, "I'm a lead player." And we're like, "All right." So we get him out to us to try out. We hit tryouts. We're so cool. We have to have tryouts. Right. And, dude, he starts playing like Children of Bodom, like flawlessly.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, like 3 seconds in, I told the guys, I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty well set. Now this guy's no nonsense. He's like light years beyond us, So we took him on as our lead player. And again, we started making buttloads of music and not playing it out. And I butted heads with him too many times. And, he was very particular about the direction he wanted to go. And we weren't able to keep up. And we certainly didn't want to go strictly that direction. And that's where the split came. And that's where the band started. So sorry to kind of get off the subject. But yeah, my dad's probably the reason why I play, and more or less the reason why Jesse plays. His influence on us was very heavy in terms of like, we also want to do this thing that he does. So my mom's side, there's not much music there, but my house, in the 80s, there was always music. And if it wasn't coming from studs, it was coming from, local radio stations, records, MTV. Music was always there, whether it was being played live or not. And that does have a pretty big, I think if your parents love music, that's almost as good as if your parents play music. Yeah. So that can be a pretty heavy influence on you in terms of maybe you want to do something that is in the field of creating music later on in life. And like I said, I think that applies to Jesse as well. I'm pretty sure just constantly being surrounded by music, was very influential on our decisions to do what we did later on.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a musician myself, but like I said, I'm obsessed with music, and my son is very talented and plays multiple instruments. And I think,
yeah.
And his grandfather, my ex-wife's father, was very musical as well and played multiple instruments. But I think, so there's definitely that influence, of course.
Right on.
But I think, just my son always heard music coming from my office, at home, and in the car, and I was always, playing stuff. In fact, I remember I think he was 2 years old. He was just a little tyke, and I came home from work, and we had a babysitter, and the babysitter said, kind of pulled me aside and said, so your son asked me if I would put on some CDs today, but I didn't want to touch your stuff. I'm like, oh, that's fine. He goes, yeah. He asked me to put on Alice Cooper. That's a little worrisome. I'm like, oh, it's cool. It's cool. He can sing along with it. He knows the lyrics.
Right.
Yeah. I thought that was pretty funny, but anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Well, I also was curious, and I wanted to ask you this, and partly, for the influence it had on you as a musician, but also just this kind of continuation of what's happening there. And I apologize, my own ignorance. I had no idea until more recently how that Ohio is a hotbed for metal music. I mean, in a lot of ways.
We've got a lot of bands here, and even before, I think that probably now more people pay attention to the state because of Midnight. Midnight's one of the biggest bands right now. They are very hot right now, and they garner a lot of attention. So number one, you've got the connection of, Jamie Walters, who's, you're going to find bands he was in prior to Midnight. If you care to research, there's all kinds of them. There's Destructor, there's Sweet Rocks, there's Boulder. So stuff that he did, you're going to check that out. And then you're going to find out that there's all kinds of bands in Ohio alone, not just Cleveland. I mean, Columbus, Dayton, all over the place, Athens. I mean, Skeleton Witch is from Ohio.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't realize what level of, well, not what level, but the percentage of bands that are in the state's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And yeah, we've got a lot of them. I mean, like Nunslaughter, you'll see a lot of, Nunslaughter topping a lot of festivals and such, Also from, I mean, Don doesn't live in Ohio, I don't think, but they're a Cleveland band, So we've got a lot of bands in Ohio, and a very diverse scene throughout the state. And I'm sure there's more that I can't even think of or remember. Ohio in general has a lot of music that comes from it that sometimes you just don't know.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see what bands and musicians themselves have come from the state. Like the state puts out some musicians for sure.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me. Because I mean, I'm from Utah. I live in Utah, and we have the Osmonds, and
was it Wild Horse? Excuse me, was it Wild Horses or Crazy Horses? That record's great. That's what I was trying to say without dying over here.
I mean, there's been a little bit that's come out here, but not like there's no, I mean, and there's a metal scene, there's an underground metal scene here, but it's never been huge.
Right.
And it might be because of the culture here, but I mean, it always fascinated me that, Ohio has, and same thing. I didn't realize, I mean, even, look at like the death metal scene there is huge. I mean,
the death metal scene here is massive, especially in Cleveland.
Dismemberment.
But keep in mind, like 20, 30 years ago, there were record companies in Cleveland.
Yeah, true.
And that has an impact on, the area's music in and of itself. So, I think that had a big impact on why there were bands, in Ohio. To begin with, you wouldn't think that there would be as many bands as there are here, but there are a shitload of bands in the state. I mean, metal in particular.
Yeah.
There's a lot of metal bands here.
Well, and as you mentioned, with the record companies that were there, and then also the, especially if you go back into the 60s and 70s with the, Cleveland, with the radio stations that literally launched career, like Cheap Trick, for one, was that Cleveland radio station kept playing Budokan, and that's why they became famous. Rush, Cleveland, it's interesting that, I mean, you just don't think in terms, I mean, when you think metal, you think, Los Angeles, you think, at least, especially in the 80s, it was Los Angeles and New York, really is kind of the hotbeds. Now, especially now, I think because of the internet and the way that things are recorded, and you don't have to live in Los Angeles anymore. But it's interesting that there is such a huge movement in Ohio. I found that, I mean, and there's metal bands everywhere, but just the more and more I started to realize, like, a lot of stuff I listen to is coming out of Ohio. I'm like, what is going on in Ohio? Like, is there something in the water? Like, what is happening there? Like, I need to go there. Like, I need to check this out.
Yeah, we've got our fair share of a lot of bands and a lot of musicians, from even like the northeastern part of the state. It just in that little area, there's a massive amount of talent. You find yourself double dipping quite a bit. It's like, our bassist Ed Stevens is in like every other band in Cleveland. He's one of the best, and it's if you want the best, you've got a handful of individuals you could choose from, really. And he's in Ringworm, and that takes up a lot of, he's in Shed the Skin, he's in all kinds of projects, he's done all kinds of things, and and that's the thing too. Like, for me, like our problem in Vindicator has always been retaining a lead player. Like, they always leave, and we don't have them around here. There's like 3 lead players in Ohio, it seems like.
Oh, wow.
And if you've Sean VANIK is far too busy with Midnight, and VANIK and Vandallus, he has no room for other things. And there's just like no one else. It's like that's all you get. And so you gotta branch out, and you got to keep an open mind. Like back in my earlier days, I would have never taken an out-of-state lead player. They would have had to have moved here. James LaRue, an example. Like, I was of the mind that you had to rehearse together and you had to hang together and you had to, I mean, it does make a difference.
Yeah.
But again, if you want to keep going, you got to adjust. And that's what I had to do. I had to eventually, well, this kid wants to do it and he's like James LaRue Jr. So he can stay where he is as long as he puts his solos on these songs and is available when we need him, which isn't very often, works out fine, you know? So, but yeah, there's a lot of us here. There's a lot of creation here in terms of like, you know, people who make music. Certain skill sets are a little, we need some more, but if you're in the right genre, there certainly is not a shortage of death metal musicians in my area. There's a lot of them. But you know, for a thrash band, it was difficult for us. We couldn't really find people who wanted to do it. You know, again, even some of the guys up and coming, it was a little too immature for them. So, you know, not brutal enough or something. So we did struggle with keeping, you know, people around or, you know, so we've had quite the laundry list of lead players. People come for about, you know, no more than a year and then they're out. I wish it was because we were assholes, but it's typically because they've got something else they want to do and they kind of just move on. So,
gotcha.
Which leaves us in a lurch, but we continue to press on and do what we do.
Cool. I wanted to change subject a little bit here. You of course mentioned earlier in the interview, you talked a little bit about there's a podcast that you do. And that was always one thing that I always thought was really cool and it's an interesting kind of cultural phenomenon, I think, in some ways, the kind of the marriage of heavy metal and horror, the horror genre. It's interesting because we're all kind of like that. I think like
right,
a lot of us that listen to, for some weird reason, it's just you gravitate to, if you gravitate to metal, you gravitate to horror films.
Right.
And of course that's a blanket statement, but it seems like a lot of people I know that listen to metal or play metal like love the horror genre. And I don't know how to explain that, but I think it's a really interesting, it's really interesting that you know, we've kind of, you know, gelled these two seemingly very different things together. Apart from lyrically, you know, there is a lot of horror in various metal, especially death metal. But it's interesting because I think, and I was going to ask you this, sorry, my long-winded question.
Oh, you're fine.
Because I think it kind of, and maybe it's, you know, that teenage angst, because I think I came into metal and horror around the same time. From what I remember, I don't know exactly, but you know, from you know, early, you know, sometime in my childhood, probably when I was at, you know, like 10 or 11, somewhere around there, I kind of became obsessed with both. And I don't know what that is exactly. And I was kind of curious if you had the similar experience.
Well, trying to think. I think that heavy metal for me was first because, you know, my parents just called it rock and roll. You know, if they had Black Sabbath on, it wasn't heavy metal, it wasn't doom metal. They didn't get into the specifics. It was just rock and roll.
Yeah.
You know, I wasn't allowed to watch scary movies until like I was 7 or 8 and even then, yeah, I usually had nightmares or something. So it took me a while to really get into the genre. I think for a lot of people, there's a lot of similarities in terms of themes, you know, depending on what you listen to. I think if you love power metal, you're going to love fantasy films, you know, or sci-fi movies, you know, something like that. But I think the two go together well. Just, I don't know. I think it is because of just, you know, it's just, I believe it's the theme. There's a lot of similar, like you'd mentioned, a lot of similar lyrical themes and feels. But I mean, I can't really get more in depth than that. I really just believe that there's a lot of similarities in terms of, you know, lyrical themes and feels of films and albums, you know, that they kind of are just kind of a no-brainer, you know, it's an easy pair. You don't have to work too hard to make those two pieces fit.
Yeah, that's well said. I definitely very much agree with you there. Well, Vic, this has been really, really fun chatting with you. I've really enjoyed this a lot. I have one last question for you.
Oh, absolutely.
So as I think you know, my blog, you know, I pair brews and tunes. I pair craft beer with metal mostly and hard rock albums. So not to put you on the spot, but you know, it's Saturday night. What beer are you drinking and what album are you spinning?
Okay, give me a minute for this. Unfortunately, I won't be drinking anything because I'm just too still in the recovery phase. But if I were going to drink tonight, I would probably be reaching for something sour. I find myself drawn to sours. I've got some Flemish browns in my fridge right now that
Nice.
I only drank one and I loved it so much. And I got to stop doing this. I'm real bad about like, I like these, so I'm going to keep them way too long and cherish them. Like, no, you should drink them while they're fresh.
Yeah.
It's a nitro too. I believe I mean, which I don't really give a shit about, smoother bubbles or harsher carbonation, but
Right.
some people really love that, but it's delicious. I love it. I can't remember the brewery at the moment because it's the first time I've ever seen it. The cans are only like 10 ounces. So they're denying you that extra 2 delicious ounces of this shit. But I'd probably be grabbing that. I have a stack of vinyl. I'm really bad about this. I don't know if you're the same way, but I'll get records, all kinds of them. And I let them accumulate till I have like 50. And I'm like, I should probably listen to these. Do you do that? I do that all the time. I'll pre-order stuff. I'll buy stuff new and then just not listen to it for like a year. I don't know why I'm that way. I'm always doing something. I don't find myself sitting down as much as I'd like and just put a record on and do nothing else. And I think that's the best way, whether you're listening to CDs or vinyl or cassettes, just sit down, stay off your phone, hold the packaging in your hand, which is really fun with vinyl because everything's real big, and just sit there and listen to that and look at the thing, look at what it comes with. If it's just the art or if you've got an insert, I think that I would probably have on. There's a couple records I've been wanting to tear into. I'm a big fan of live albums on vinyl, especially bootlegs. I've got this. I bought my wife a Metallica live bootleg from like the '94 Woodstock, or was it Woodstock or Lollapalooza or some shit fest? But they were still playing like Black Album stuff, and before they weren't quite playing Load or Reload stuff yet. And I'm really interested to hear that performance because it's right on the cusp of their big change, and I want to see if like things have changed there. But I also recently got Fuck You and Then Some, which of course I want to put that on. I also make it a point to collect every live rock and metal performance that's done in Cleveland, and some of Fuck You was recorded at the Agora Ballroom, I think so.
Oh, nice. Which
is the same place that Saints Will Conquer live was recorded in the Cleveland Agora Ballroom. So if it was recorded live in Cleveland, even on a radio station, I got a Rory Gallagher live in Cleveland. I love him. I'm a sucker for that shit. Nice. But it would be a vinyl, and it would probably be that Metallica bootleg or that Overkill live record. Well, it's an EP, so it's only like half of it's live and half of it's like studio stuff. So
yeah, but
one of those two,
nice.
Or I would just say fuck it and pull out a Labatt Blue Light Tall Boy and put on Slough-Fegg's Traveler and just melt away the hours. I fucking love that record. So
nice.
One of those several probably.
Awesome. I love it. That is great.
Sorry, that was real drawn out. Sorry.
No, that was fantastic. I love it. That is great. Well, Vic, thank you so much for chatting with me today. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah. And for those watching, please look in the comments below. You'll see links to the pages that Vic spans. Please check it out. If you don't have it already, I would highly suggest picking up Communal Decay. You can get that on Bandcamp on the band's page. It is if you like thrash metal, you'll love that album. It's excellent. So thank you so much. Good talking to you.
Thank you.